Welcome back, dear listeners. Now, again, if you're new to the show, you just stumbled upon this episode and you're a first-time honorary dear listener, kind of how these episodes go is we'll break it down to the development history of the game and the reception, and then we'll go into a brief spoiler-free review, and then we'll go straight into the themes of the game, and that's when we'll get into spoiler territory. And again, we'll warn you about that, so if you're playing through the game currently and you don't want anything spoiled, we'll help you out there. But if you've played through the game and you want to hear us talk about it, then you can keep on listening. So we will start off with the development history of this game, and starting off with Eiji Aonuma, the series producer. He went into Breath of the Wild with the focus of rethinking the conventional mechanics of Zelda, and they wanted this one to be completely different. And actually, this thinking was so prevalent with Aonuma that it influenced A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS and how it kind of broke into this non-linear, open-world, objective-based kind of gameplay. So, dear listeners, if you haven't played that on 3DS, I highly recommend it. And then in 2014, Aonuma said that he wanted to alter the norms of dungeons and puzzle solving in Zelda and make the story entirely optional. This would allow a unique ability to make it to the end of the game without even progressing through the story. And while it's entirely possible in Breath of the Wild to make a beeline to Ganon at the beginning of the game, I don't personally recommend it because you miss out on both some really good story elements and very helpful items, and plus you'll probably just get wrecked worse than you do in a game of Dark Souls. Now, the developers, right? The developers also created a playable 2D prototype similar to the original Zelda to experiment with the different physics and chemistry based puzzles. This prototype was unveiled at GDC 2017, so earlier this year, titled Change in Constant: Breaking Conventions with the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And you can actually, I think, words are hard. You can look that up, I think, on YouTube or The Verge or Techno Buffalo. They have some articles on it. Here we go. Breath of the Wild was also originally built with touchscreen features for the Wii U, but those features were later removed when developers found that looking away from the main screen was more of a distraction than a fun gameplay mechanic. It was also at the same time that Breath of the Wild was moved to release in tandem with the Nintendo Switch. And also at this time, a change was made with Link's hand, specifically which hand he uses to swing his sword. Series veterans know Link is left-handed, but in Breath of the Wild, he is actually right-handed to match the control scheme of action buttons being on the right-hand side of the controller. Breath of the Wild's art or overall look was inspired by, and I'm probably not pronouncing these right, Gouache, and en plein air art. Dear listeners, I'll include links to your show notes. Words are hard. Gouache, guacamole, whatever, is a type of painting that dates back 600 years and is similar to watercolor. An interesting aspect of this kind of art is actually the paint that's used can be re-wet and modified as needed. En plein air is the practice of painting outside in nature, and both of these styles can clearly be seen when playing the game by looking at the watercolor-esque design in colors and look, and the vast, beautiful vistas of the landscape. And actually, speaking of the landscape, Monolith Soft, the studio behind the popular Xenoblade series, assisted with the design of the topography, for the world. The design for the world and levels is actually based on Kyoto, Japan, the hometown of game director Hidemaru Fujibayashi. If this gives us any idea of what Xenoblade Chronicles 2 will be like past Xenoblade games, it should be an awesome, sprawling world ripe for exploration.
Right?
Hopefully we'll get some sweet mechs in there too. Breath of the Wild is also the first time voice acting appears in a mainline Zelda game, and no, Hyrule Warriors does not count as a mainline Zelda game. The game did not originally feature the ability to mix and match the 8 different languages the game launched with. For example, you couldn't mix Japanese voiceover with English subtitles, but an update this past May changed that, and you can now play the game mixing those languages however you like. The game's original score was composed by Monika Kataoka, who had previously worked on the series with The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, and Yasuaki Iwata, I am sorry if I'm butchering these names, a relative newcomer at Nintendo who had only worked on 2 previous games for the company. The soundtrack was primarily written by and based around the piano with an ambient focus in mind instead of a more melodic one, which was a first for the series. According to the sound director Hajime Wakai, this helped add authenticity to the game's environments and scenery and was taken on as a challenge by the sound team, and I personally think they nailed it. After a development period of 5 years, the game went gold on February 3rd of 2017, with Nintendo holding an event celebrating it, and the game later launched on March 3rd, 2017, the same day that Nintendo Switch released, and it also released on the Wii U at that same time. Now, in regards to how the game runs between both the Wii U and the Switch, it's apparent that the Switch has a slight advantage. Though the Switch and Wii U versions run the same when the Switch is undocked, docking the Switch gives players a smoother frame rate and overall better performance. Now, that doesn't mean the Wii U version is unplayable or ugly, it just means it will be a smoother time on the Switch. And honestly, as someone who has played through 95% of Breath of the Wild on my Switch undocked from the TV, it's a great time. It's a blast. It runs well. I would assume the Wii U version runs just as well. Now, as far as reception, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Critics universally acclaimed Breath of the Wild upon its release, quickly considered it a masterpiece and one of the greatest video games of all time, where it holds the largest number of perfect reviews of any game on the review aggregator website Metacritic. It was the third largest Zelda release in the United Kingdom, behind Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Nintendo reported that Breath of the Wild sold more than 1.3 million copies in the United States in March 2017, 925,000 copies of which were for the Switch version, attaining a 100% attach rate for the console. Duh, there was nothing else to play at the time.
Yeah.
In its year-end report for the 2016 fiscal year, which ended on March 31st, 2017, Nintendo reported it had sold 3.84 million copies of Breath of the Wild worldwide. Let me see here. And that is all I have for reception and development. So,
some fascinating stuff.
It's some cool stuff. I had no idea Monolith Soft helped them out with the environments, and now I'm like, I just want to play Xenoblade 2 even more now, because if it's anything
Seriously.
like Breath of the Wild, dude, count me in, straight up. But
I want to play that 2D prototype, so I want to do.
I know, right?
For sure.
So
that sounds awesome.
So real quick, let's talk about Breath of the Wild real quick. Again, no spoilers. Let's just try to avoid those as best we can. Let's just give our thoughts on the game, just kind of a review of sorts. Jonathan, since you are the guest of honor, you go ahead and start.
Why, thank you very much. So I played the game like nonstop, obviously, for weeks and weeks after it came out. But over the past several weeks, I've actually stepped away from it a good bit. I've dabbled in here and there, just doing random stuff. But I've had some time to kind of like be away from it, reflect on it, think about it. Still one of my favorite games I've ever played. It is not without its flaws. I would say, just to start with the negative, I would say probably its biggest downfall, which is by design, and I don't know what they could have done about it, is the fact that the story does suffer from how extremely open it is. Some of those little blips are interesting, but every time they end it, I mean, the longest one is probably like 2 minutes, maybe, like they're very short. And each time when a story blip would end, it was like, oh man, I want to see more. Like, I want to know more about what's going on. And it certainly gave us a window into the personality of Zelda, especially, and some other characters. There was some okay acting. A lot of it was pretty cheesy, but it's fine. But just because they knew that, you could have come across any of those story snippets in any order, they can't do some big reveal that needed build up, because you might go straight to that one first. So it's like there's literally no way around that. And I just think the story suffered from that. But, the fact of the matter is that the rest of the game is so unbelievable that it didn't really bother me. But I think my major takeaway, and lots of people have talked about this, is the way they tore apart the open world formula and built it back from scratch. And I've thought about it a good bit. A lot of what people say is that, you go up to a tower and you get that tower and it unlocks a certain area of the geography, like in, Far Cry or like, Assassin's Creed, something like that. But the difference is that it doesn't put a bunch of dots on your map. You have to look around and see what looks interesting and place those dots yourself. A lot of people have pointed that out, and that's totally great. But I think a way it goes beyond that still is games like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, and even, a lot of people are going to compare it to Horizon Zero Dawn. They have rules and systems in place. And as the game goes, it teaches you the rules and systems. And it says, you can do this, you cannot do that. These types of weapons are good against those types of enemies. If you want to upgrade, level up this way, you can do that. And you learn the rules of the game in the first few hours as it teaches you what to do. The way that Breath of the Wild rips that whole thing apart and starts over is it doesn't need to train you, because the things you need to know apply in real life. And that is something that I'm not sure any video game has ever done to that degree. So there's a pretty famous YouTube video. I guess if you're a Zelda fan, it's famous. This YouTube video of this guy who, there was a puzzle in a shrine, and he was like, what you need to do is get all these metal blocks. You need to unlock these cages to remove some metal blocks, connect the metal blocks together between these two electrical nodes, and the electricity travels across all the blocks and unlocks the door. And he couldn't figure out how to get one of the blocks. And he was like, I cannot get this last metal block. So finally, he went to his inventory and unequipped all his swords, his metal swords, and just dropped his swords in a string between the two nodes, and it connected the electricity, and the door opened.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, that would work in real life. And so so many people, if you ask, what do you love about Zelda Breath of the Wild? A lot of people will say, well, I was going through the world, and I tried this thing, and it worked. Like, if there's an enemy with wooden armor around his leg, and you shoot the wooden armor with a fire arrow, and it burns off. And that's just a small example, but there's the game doesn't need you to teach. The game really doesn't need you to teach. I can't even talk. The game doesn't need to teach you a lot of the mechanics. Some of the obviously you need to get taught, and they teach that in very subtle ways. But so much of it you already know, and yeah. I think that's such a great open world formula, because you just get thrown in there, and the world acts and reacts to you the way you would expect it to, in a way that video games just haven't been able to do. So I think that's probably my favorite thing about it, and I'm excited to see where they take that next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, just, piggybacking off what you said, with the way that they created the open world. I think we could talk about how we all played the game, and it would all be very different, yes. But that's fine. Some of us, I am very much in a shooter, like run in, shoot 'em up, bang, bang type player. I don't do much stealth, but in this game, you could do whatever you want. Like if you go into Hyrule Castle, you could bust down the front door, and you could go in and you could fight all of the different enemies as you make your way through the castle, or you can go through the tunnels, underneath, and the on the carts, the mine carts. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can play the game. You could attack the champions or whatever in whatever order you wanted to go to. Mm-hmm. You could have put 50 hours in the game and not done any of the story stuff and still felt like you were accomplishing things. These yes. aren't things that you can normally say in a lot of games. I mean, we could, again, talk about different experiences we had, talking about Eventide Island. Like, that's one of those things, you get there, you're like, I can't reach this island even by jumping off the highest part of this cliff. So you've got to be creative of, okay, how am I going to get there? We could have all done that in different ways, and we probably did. Okay, then you get there and you're like, holy cow, like, what is going on here? And then you figure out what's going on. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but there were so many of those moments throughout the game of like, oh, this is pretty cool, or I wonder what's over there. And then you get over there and there's either a town or there's a just something going on there, and you're like, okay, I've got to figure out this puzzle. I mean, going through the dark woods and figuring out, okay, how am I gonna maneuver through the woods and figure out the little puzzle that's even within that. There were so many of those little things, little details that made the game really good. I mean, it wasn't without its frustrations. I mean, rain was extremely frustrating. You're like trying to climb something or trying to get through something, and it's like, of course it's raining, or I'm trying to light all these blue torches, but it's raining right when I need to do that. So there are those little things you're like, okay, rain, you need to chill out. Or when you first go up against some of the different machines, and they're just so overpowered, and you're just getting destroyed, and you're just trying to run away from their lasers without getting hit, all those things. But then as you progress, by the end of the game, I'm like, I've got the master, I've got the shields, I've got the bow and arrows. Like I can literally go up and fight anything right now, and I'm going to be able to take it out. That doesn't mean that they weren't still really hard. What were the horse beast things again? I haven't played in a while. What were they called? The
Lionels. Yeah,
Lionels. Like it didn't matter how good I was, and there's different type of Lionels even. Different ones had different attacks, and so some in the beginning they were really hard, but by the end I was really good at those. But then you get to the end, I'm like I couldn't counter them quite as well, and still gave me a really good challenge. And so, I mean, just the game. Jonathan was right on with the story. There was enough, like the memories. Like I really enjoyed finding the different memories and seeing some of that stuff. The dungeons were okay. I don't think the dungeons were as great as other dungeons in other Zelda games. They had their strengths, and the puzzles were kind of cool. How you go in the dungeon and different things within, like for each beast, allowed you to maneuver and get through the dungeon. I thought that was cool, but I don't think that they were as good as some of the other dungeons that you had in Zelda. But the amount of stuff that you could do, I mean, the reason that the DLC is really on the table even for me is I just want to see where I've run and where I haven't explored and what I haven't done. Like if they just said like, here, you can buy this for $5, I might just buy that and ignore the other stuff right now. That's not an option, but I'm really interested because there's so much to do in the game that I know I didn't. Jonathan put in like probably 3 or 4 times the amount of hours that I put it in, and I put in a good amount. I just know how many he did, but it just means there's so much that I didn't do, and that's why I'm like, I don't know if I need to buy the DLC because I know whenever I want to go back to it, I've got a lot to do. Hard mode seems interesting and kind of reset it, but it's like I don't want to start over because I know how much time I put into it. But if I did, it would be almost a new game. Yeah, I'd have the basics down, but I could explore and I could approach the game from a total, I could turn off the HUD and I could just no HUD it and just go at it that way. A lot of people are trying it that way. There's a lot of those little things that you could do to really get the most out of this game. But even like, again, I put 60, 70 hours into the game, and I feel like, maybe I didn't stretch it for every penny, but I got so much out of the game that it's probably one of the, if not the best Zelda, let alone best Zeldas, one of probably the best games. Because it's going to be one of those games where we remember when it came out. There's probably not a ton of those games where, like, I remember when I played Breath of the Wild. At least for me, that'll be a game that I always talk about of like, yeah, I remember when the Switch came out and there wasn't a lot to play, but man, Breath of the Wild was so good. It's like Mario 64 for me now. It's one of those games that I'll always talk about that, like, redefine some of these things.
It's a great comparison.
Breath of the Wild has that ability, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
So
I'm just gonna come out of the gate and just say this: Breath of the Wild right now is my game of the year. I really love this game, and I've been kind of dipping in and out of the game for the past few months, playing it here and there. But every single time I boot this game up, I am just completely enamored by it because I think what they did, this is honestly my favorite open world of any game I've ever played, because every single time I jump into the game, I always find something new. Like the other day, I booted it up and was running through this like mountain desert region at night, and all of a sudden this like dragon was flying over my head, and I'm like, what in the world is going on right now? There's always this sense of excitement, or really adventure would be a better word, because you never know what you're gonna find when you go to the mountains in the distance, or you you go over this valley of snow. You never know what you're gonna find, and there's always these little moments of like, this is awesome. I did not know this was here. I remember the first time I found a labyrinth, and I'm not gonna really say much about it, but it was really special and really cool. And I feel like the game is filled with tons of moments where it's these little special moments where you discover a new area, or you learn this idea that you have actually works in the game. I remember when the game gives you a certain ability to make like the ice pillars. I'm not going to go any further than that. But the floor was covered in water, and I couldn't get past this door, and I'm like, what am I supposed to freaking do here? Like, I don't understand it. And I'm looking around trying to figure it out, and I'm like, wait a minute. is the water going underneath the door? Can I use the ice thing to lift the door up? And I tried it out and it worked. And I put the Switch down and was like, this game is on a whole other level. Like, this is insanely cool. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this game is that while I don't think the story is the best personally out of all the Legend of Zeldas that I've played, I do think the gameplay, the world, and the mechanics are easily the best in the entire series. And one of the reasons why I keep coming back to the game is just so I can keep trying these things out and keep kind of pushing myself to think in different ways. Like, I went and did the Eventide Island a couple nights ago, and even that is a challenge in deconstructing everything you've learned and kind of learning how to apply what you've learned even in these really cool ways. And so the game, I think what I can say about this game in summary is that I love that it's such a throwback to classic Nintendo games where they put you in this game, they teach you the mechanics by basically having you try them out, and they treat you like an adult. It's like, you want to go there? Cool. Go explore and take some of the principles you've learned and then apply those. It doesn't hold your hand, and I know that's frustrating for a lot of people, but I appreciate it because it pushes me to think, it challenges me, and it's so incredibly fun when the game kind of breaks boundaries like that and is such a break from kind of what we're used to. So I really, really stinking love the game. So
I would love to add one more thought, if I may. Something I thought of that I really wanted to bring up. Fine.
I'm kidding. Go for it.
And that is that the Breath of the Wild does not have a leveling system. And I actually saw a few people tweet out when the game launched, like, what the heck? I like leveling in my open world games. Like, what is this? And I really didn't think that was a big deal. Like, I didn't think it was a good or bad thing. I was like, oh, it doesn't have leveling, whatever. But now that I've gone through the whole game and done pretty much everything there is to do, and I've gone back and played through a second time, something dawned on me. And that is to use Skyrim as an example, although lots of games do this. Skyrim has leveling. If you're level 8 in Skyrim and you come across a level 20 mage, you're not going to survive. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure some crazy, Skyrim nerd out there could probably be fine. But like the average player, if you're pretty good at the game, there's nothing you can do. They can basically one hit you and you're gone because you're level 8. Once you hit level 20, you didn't necessarily get better. You're probably better at the game in some ways, but your character got more powerful. So every time you do that exact same swing, you do more damage. So it's like, okay, well, I leveled up. And Breath of the Wild does have elements of leveling.
Yeah, it does.
Early game, you get weak weapons. As you progress, you find stronger weapons. But the simple fact is you could run straight, like you were saying, Adam, you can run straight to Hyrule Castle and get a sword with 50 hit points as long as you can survive the run and be fine. So there's leveling, but it's also, you can, if you know where to go, you can do whatever. But the thing about it that is so cool that I realize is the game, what levels up, quote unquote, is you as the player. Because the better you get at Breath of the Wild, the more you play it, it kind of doesn't matter what you have. You can use everything around you in the world to your advantage. And kind of to prove the point, just to see if I could do it, when I started my second playthrough, I got out of the first area, did the required couple of things there. I grabbed a pot lid for a shield, ran naked straight to Hyrule Field, found a guardian, and then took him out in 20 seconds.
Are you serious?
And because if you know what you're doing, all you need is you can use the weakest shield in the game with one defense, and you can wipe a guardian out in less than 20 seconds. And it's because you didn't level, and the thing is, like, I'm not necessarily bragging because it's actually not super hard to do as long as you know what you're doing and you've played the game enough. It's not like extremely hard. You just have to know what you're doing. And what I mean by that is, instead of leveling up your character, the game, by teaching you how to play, literally levels you up. And so you don't need a leveling system. It's like, and that's super, super satisfying to be able to run around and say, you know what, whether I have a good weapon set or not, even if all my weapons break, I can like destroy in this game because I know what I'm doing. I think that is such again, just ripping apart what we know and what we think of in open world games and rebuilding it. It's just, I think it's spectacular the way they did that.
Definitely.
So that's my final thought.
So, dear listeners, if you don't have this game yet, we'll wait for you to go to GameStop or wherever and get the game and play it. You know, you can just hit the pause button here, go play it. And because if you don't want anything spoiled, this is where you pause the episode, because we're gonna dive into some of the themes of Breath of the Wild, dive into a little bit of spoiler territory, and kind of go from there. So this is your final warning. If you don't want any bit of this game spoiled, which, yeah, no, we haven't done it so far. If you don't want this game spoiled at all, this is your final warning to pause the episode, go buy the game, play it. We'll see you in 70 to 80 hours, and then finish the episode. But if you have played through the game and you want to hear us talk about it, then you can keep listening. So again, final warning, spoilers. Here we go. Master Sword.
Bruce Willis was dead the whole time.
What?
Sorry.
Did we both say the Master Sword is in the game?
No, I said Bruce Willis was dead the whole time.
Oh,
dang! I know that reference. All right. So themes of Breath of the Wild. I know the story was kind of very light this time around. But what are some things that kind of came up while you guys were playing? I know one of the things for me personally that I thought of is just kind of when you're really going through the game after Link wakes up and you're kind of seeing how Hyrule is after what happened at the castle and how Ganon took it over. I kept thinking back to this verse of, and I didn't get a chance to look up where it is exactly in scripture, but just how creation, like all of creation's kind of groaning and longing for this redemption, because everywhere you go in Breath of the Wild, there's elements of like, yeah, people are getting by, there's a little bit of joy, but ultimately there's this kind of underlying feeling of sadness or despair, like everybody's expecting to be released from this evil or this kind of oppression, and so it's just interesting how that's kind of a big theme of really freeing this land from this evil oppression that's taking place, and kind of going from there. I know that was just a big theme that I saw, that I was like, wow, this is very interesting and kind of similar to how we are in real life, because we're in the same boat. You know, we're under the curse of sin. We're expecting a release from this oppression, this kind of climactic finale where evil is completely destroyed and we're freed. And so that was just something I kept thinking about playing through the game personally. I don't know what else you guys came up with, but yeah.
Go ahead, Jonathan. What are some things that maybe stuck out to you?
So I don't know. I feel like that was a pretty great biblical reference. As far as just, I'm not sure if I have any more of those. But as far as just the story in general, we kind of touched on it earlier. It just, by nature, it had to be a little lighter than most Zelda games. But one thing I did enjoy, sort of as a change of pace from other Zelda games, which, like, Ocarina of Time had that, like, holy crap, Link was asleep for 7 years. Now he's an adult. Everything's different. Oh my God, like this huge moment that was like high level, like epic kind of thing. Whereas conversely, Breath of the Wild, you got some like smaller glimpses into like the personality, like what makes Zelda tick, why she treats Link the way she does, why she's conflicted about certain things. And I appreciated that even further than the what do you call it? The video clips themselves, like those.
Oh, the memories.
Cutscene, yeah, memories, the cutscenes. Beyond those, there were a few things. There were some books to read in Hyrule Castle, written by Zelda herself and by the king, on like events and what their thoughts were and what they were struggling with, to kind of like broaden that some more. And then beyond that, there was a lot of environmental storytelling where you walk into a village and it's got a name that you recognize from another Zelda game, and it's like, whoa, this place was decimated. Like, what happened here? And then some of the dead guardians clamoring around the Temple of Time, and they're all frozen in place. And it's like, man, like something bad. Like, there's a lot, you run across a lot of places, and it's like, dang, what happened? A lot of really cool environmental storytelling. So I don't know if it's an equal trade-off. Like, oh, this is better storytelling than other Zelda games. Like, I think I prefer the Ocarina of Time style, but I enjoyed it for what it was. It didn't take anything away from the game, certainly, and I thought it was good.
I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna bounce off what you were saying about Zelda and Link, like that was a really interesting part of the story. Is seeing kind of the tension that was there between them two, and you didn't like as I'm playing, I'm like, why is she so pissed off the whole time? She's she was just so. But then as they explain the story and as they look at the tension of, there were a couple of times I think though she's like, I didn't like ask for you to be here. I didn't ask for you to be my protector, but he was just constantly there guarding her, protecting her. But yeah, I thought that was one really interesting part of the story was just the relationship. Because in the other ones, it's like, oh, Zelda and Link, they're good. But in this one, it wasn't just a given that they were just like close. There was a lot of tension there, and then you get to the end of the game, and it's like, hey, let's go rebuild Hyrule together, type of thing. And so I thought that was one part of the story that I did really, really enjoy.
Yeah, that's for sure. And really, actually, speaking of biblical parallels, one thing just hit me. Zelda is instructed by her father, which was, knowledge passed down from their ancestors. Like you have this power of light within you, or not within you, but like from the goddesses or whatever, this power of light that you must understand how to use to defeat Ganon should he ever arise. And you can make that parallel with like the power of Christ in us or whatever. What she chooses to do instead is go do her own thing and figure out her own way and raise up this army of guardians, these ancient guardians. And she thought, I want to get into this technology. I want to research all this stuff. I'm going to use the guardians and do what I want to do. And in the end, had she found the power of light within her, she would have been able to defeat Ganon that day. But because she had her own plan with the guardians, Ganon took all that, everything she did, turned it against her and destroyed everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that was an interesting parallel there. So,
man, after finishing 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You by Tony Reinke, I'm just thinking of how just kind of how a lot of people, I think specifically here in our culture in America, just rely on technology so much to be kind of like their own personal savior, so to speak, that it honestly winds up being either a hindrance or a destructive force or something like that. I mean, I just think of people who, need to have the latest tech every year, and so they go out and spend hundreds, thousands of dollars trying to upgrade and keep it all maintained. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like getting new technology or staying up to date or anything, but I've seen it done to an obsessive level to where it's like it can be used against you. So man, that's a very interesting call out.
Yeah, a lot of things that we think are we think they're for this is going to help me so much, but it's either dividing your time or your focus or your family or a lot of different things, and so that's a really good just perception there. I think some of the other things, just there's a lot of things in regards to sacrifice. You look at Link's sacrifice. The reason that he is dead or asleep or whatever you want to call it for 100 years was he chose to protect Zelda and kind of like gave his life to protect her. And so you've got that idea of sacrifice. And then you see the same thing even with Zelda where, she made these mistakes, but she basically, and I don't know if she knew this, I don't remember this part of the story, but in order to seal Ganon within the castle, that meant sealing herself away also within the castle. Yeah. And so again, sacrificing her freedom, sacrificing her ability to do whatever for the good of Hyrule. Just another, symbolism there of sacrifice. And I think anytime you see sacrifice, that's a shadow, not a perfect shadow, but I mean, if we're talking about sacrifice, we need to be thinking of the ultimate sacrifices, and we can get glimpses of that even in games like this, of where it doesn't take a lot to see that Link sacrificing of himself to protect someone else or to bring peace. Like, okay, Zelda sacrificed her freedom so that while there was still evil around Hyrule, it still protected them from the most evil. And so there's a lot of those aspects of sacrifice throughout the game that definitely bring out some interesting themes.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the cool things about what Breath of the Wild does is that even just going through the main story stuff where you're meeting the different characters along the way, you're seeing kind of their worlds that they live in, so to speak, or their towns with their cultures and stuff. you're seeing that the story is so much more than Link is going to save Zelda and defeat Ganon. It's like, no, you're going to help Zelda, you're going to defeat Ganon, but retroactively, you're helping all of these people along the way, and you're essentially saving all of them. And so it's not just Link saving Zelda, him crushing Ganon, there you go, the end. No, it's Link is helping people along the way. And this is similar to previous Zelda games, but it just feels like a little more, and I hate to word it this way, but a little more like meaningful, because you're seeing these cultures, you're seeing these civilizations, and you're like, I need to save them, because if Ganon kills Zelda, he's coming for these people, and they're all going to be dead. And so it's this broad view of one guy essentially helping these people out along the way, but ultimately getting rid of evil so everybody else can kind of prosper. And so, I mean, if you just think about it, it kind of, and again, not a perfect shadow. This is probably not what Nintendo intended, but I mean, you can really think about just the Bible and how that's similar to how Christ was. He came to earth, he helped people along the way, but the ultimate end goal was crushing Satan and allowing everybody to have an opportunity for freedom, for the gospel, that if we believe and follow, we have redemption, or we can choose to be remained chained in sin. And so I think that's one of the things I like about Zelda, is that's kind of an overarching theme or a reoccurring theme in all the games, where but more so in this one, because you actually meet a lot of people because of the different side quests, and you see their worlds and you build relationships with them. And you see a brother trying to help, or a Goron helping his brother to kind of find the strength to finish mining this tunnel or something.
Yeah, that was a super fun one. Yeah, that was awesome.
Or you're helping what are the Ritos, the birds, you're helping them do, I mean, it's all to get you connected with the world and get you to actually care about these characters. And so
yeah,
I think they did a really good job with that.
Oh, sorry.
Just real quick, let me jump in. As Logan was talking about, like, the champions, you had all these different champions that tried to, in some way, defeat Ganon, but they always said it wasn't enough, and that's why they're dead. And the thing that, as you were talking about this, it reminded me of Hebrews 12:1, how we are surrounded by this cloud of witnesses. There are these other people who have kind of gone before Link, and they have tried, and they had faith, they did their best, but they were unable to do them on their own. And so just thinking of Link as he's kind of following these other champions who has gone before, trying to defeat the enemy and weren't unable, but then you have Christ, who is the true champion, who is able to defeat the enemy with one stroke. And again, not perfect, but it just brought to mind that verse as you were talking about that. So
it's a great parallel. Yeah.
So
I was just gonna say, can we just talk for 1 second about how Sidon is like bro of the year?
Now remind me which one's Sidon.
He's the Zora prince that helps you find your way back to the Zora domain.
The dude that kept doing that really cool smile and like thumbs up. Yes.
All he talks about is how awesome you are.
Yes.
I love that dude. He was awesome. He was so funny.
So you getting that Zora suit. I went and did the Zora first, and getting that Zora suit was clutch. That's all I'm saying. Being able to fly up those waterfalls and then being thrown in the air.
Yeah.
That was like awesome. That was such a cool, because I was like, there's no swimming in this game really. So I could swim
a lot.
Okay,
yeah, you do.
So I was like, with the first suit, you swim a little faster. Okay. But then it was like, going up those waterfalls. It was like, oh my gosh, I am OP now. I can go anywhere. Like
if I could just get to the waterfall. Yes.
That was a satisfying ability for sure.
And every mountain you look at, you get to, you're like, is there a ledge that I can rest at? Because I can't make it up all the way, but if I can just make it to the ledge,
yes,
I'll be okay.
Figuring out all of, like, approaching mountains with that eye, like you're talking about, of like, okay, I can probably make it to there. It looks like there's a ledge there. Like, it's like every single thing you wanted to climb was like a puzzle of like getting to the top. It was super fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man.
But
So before we kind of round out this section, let's talk about the ending a little bit and how it's kind of similar to previous Zelda games. You go one-on-one with Ganon. But I thought, I don't remember seeing this except for maybe an Ocarina of Time, but when you go in to fight Ganon, you fight him as this kind of machination of all the different guardians, machinery type thing. And after you defeat him, you fight him as his just pure rage kind of evil form, which it almost switches into like a Monster Hunter type boss battle, which was just,
it totally does.
It was insanely fun, really great.
Dude, yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. Now, do you guys think that final battle is different than other games? Because we see these kind of themes of good versus evil, and we get to these final battles where you're defeating the evil. Did it seem different at all? Like it was taken in a little bit more of a unique approach, or was it kind of similar to past games of Zelda, or even just any game really in general?
You can go ahead, Adam.
No, you're the guest. We always let you go first.
You guys are so kind. So I don't know if either of you are planning on playing Skyward Sword or have played Skyward Sword.
I've got it, but I don't have a Wii anymore. I got one of my Wii U before I got around to playing it. I've got the game, but I don't have anything to play it on.
So the fact that Ganon basically reverts to a form of pure evil actually ties back to the end of Skyward Sword in a way, and I won't talk about that. If y'all want to wait and play Skyward Sword, I'll just skip forward.
Skip forward, because I will play it one day.
Okay, I'll skip forward. My initial take on the first form of Ganon, when he first like showed up and I saw him, I was like, what? Like, it kind of was like, he looks like a mess. Like he looks like a horribly designed, and I get it. Like it was as I fought him and I started recognizing some of the weapons from the other Ganon incarnations that you fight, it was like, oh, he's all of them together. Okay. And it made sense. So I appreciated that it made sense, but like, I just don't like the way he looks. Like, I think like when you fight him in Twilight Princess, and first he's like possessed Zelda, and then he's like the beast form, and then he's like Ganon. Like he goes through all these awesome iterations. He looks epic every time, and it's like I'm fighting something that is like awesome. And it was a tough fight, and it was a fun fight. It was entertaining to play, but it was like, okay, like he's not. His face is melting off. I don't know. But then when he changes into his map form, I was like, all right, I am on board with this. Like that fight was most a quick time event fight, like not quite. Like hit the giant glowing dot, but it was like, okay, well but it was such an epic feel. Like you're taking, like he took up like half of Hyrule field just standing there, and you're riding around on this horse, and like Zelda's cheering you on, and like it was such an awesome moment because he was like, he felt massive in Ocarina of Time when he grew to his pure Ganon form.
Yeah,
but this was just another level of like, he is huge. Like it felt so cool to do that it didn't matter. The fight was pretty simple. So I overall I really enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome.
I just can't imagine fighting him without all the champions. Like
yeah,
their help in the beginning was really nice. The first time you fight him, like, okay, half of him is dead, and then you have to fight another one. You're like, okay, so they're helpful, but they don't make it too easy. But
incidentally, without taking up too much time, if you watch some of the Breath of the Wild speedrunners, they can beat the game in like an hour and change.
Oh wow!
They get off the plateau and they run straight to Hyrule Castle naked, and they do hop around Hyrule Castle just for a second, like gathering up some food and some swords just to have something, and then they go into the final fight with like almost nothing, and Ganon's at full health. And the thing about it is, not only is Ganon at full health, but you have to fight any of those other champions that you didn't fight first.
What?
You have to fight the Gerudo boss in full and the Zora boss in full and all the ones you didn't fight, and then fight Ganon at full health.
That's crazy. With
like,
3 hearts. With 3 hearts.
They do it with 3 hearts and no armor and only like a few weapons. It's unbelievable.
I'm about to look that up.
You basically can't get hit.
Yeah, and they don't. It's nuts. Like they literally don't, because one hit would kill you immediately.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful combination of just dodging and parrying. Like you should just go look it up. It's really, just skip to the end of the speed. The first part of the speed run is pretty boring. Just skip to the fight at the end, and they're incredible. It's fascinating.
That's rad. See, that's another aspect of this game that I just really love, is that like you could go fight the final boss if you want, but man, is it going to be way harder, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a couple other things we could talk about. I did have some notes about the Terrytown quest line, but we'll save that for later. A great quest line, by the way. If you're playing the game and you have not done that yet, get on it. It's so good. I will say though that one of the cool parallels about this game, and really any game where you're defeating evil and putting a stop to it, is that it all points to really what's in Revelation, where Christ is going to come again to defeat Satan once and for all, put a stop to it. Sin will be gone, death will be gone, and he will wipe every tear from our eyes. And so it's really cool. When I was playing through Zelda and got to the end of it, I was like, dude, it's gonna be so rad when Jesus comes back. I mean, it's not gonna be exactly like this, but it's still going to be really, really cool. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about Legend of Zelda, is it has a lot of those biblical themes. And I think some of the first couple games were actually meant to have a Christian centric theme around it. But I like that it's kind of stayed in there in subtle ways throughout all these games. But yeah, Breath of the Wild is a fantastic freaking game that if you have not played it yet for whatever reason, and you made it to this point and you don't mind spoilers, just go play the game. It's so good.